Do you worry that trusting unschooling with reading might leave your child behind, even though teaching them feels wrong? As a second generation unschooler, so many parents I help face that same struggle, especially if kids aren't reading by 8 years old or even older. In this video, I'll show you the one thing kids need for reading to click on its own and the sign it's time to help so that it unfolds easily while staying true to unschooling. To start, you need to understand the problem with what most unschoolers will tell you, because I've seen it make parents lose confidence either in themselves or in unschooling. The advice they give is usually just, kids will learn to read on their own, or don't worry about it, they'll figure it out. Some go even further and say, you shouldn't help them at all because that's not unschooling. But if you're worried or feel like you're neglecting your child, that advice only makes things worse. It leaves you stuck between a rock and a hard place. If you teach them to read, you're not really unschooling. But if you don't, you worry you're failing your kids. Just a few weeks ago, Lauren suggested that we start teaching our son to read as she was starting to get anxious about it. But you don't have to choose between supporting your child and staying true to unschooling. There's a way to do both. And to see it clearly, we need to look at how reading is usually taught in school. Learning to read in school is like trying to cook popcorn in a cold pan. It doesn't matter how long you leave it in there, the popcorn isn't going to pop until the pan gets hot enough. And even then, some will pop early and some will pop late. There's no way to rush it. That's what happens with reading. In school, kids spend 700 to 1400 hours practicing from ages 5 to 11. Yet, if they're not reading by 7, they're already labelled behind or even dyslexic. That early label can actually do more harm than good, knocking a child's confidence and making reading feel unenjoyable for years. But here's the truth. Most so-called strugglers at age 7 will catch up naturally by 8 or 9 with no extra teaching. In fact, countries like Finland and Estonia don't even start formal reading until age 7, and they have far fewer dyslexia diagnoses and better reading outcomes in the long run. So if reading can't be rushed, when does it actually happen? Well, just like walking and talking, there's a natural range for reading. My niece, who's also home educated, was reading chapter books at 4. And there's another girl who taught herself at 12. So while some do it earlier and some much later, most kids will teach themselves to read between 5 and 9. If your child isn't reading yet, it's not a failure or a sign that you're neglecting them. It just means their brain isn't ready to pop. And if it takes a little longer, that's okay too. Every child's timeline is different. As Peter Gray said, learning to read when children choose to is like learning to talk. You've got to trust the timing. When the time is right, reading will happen, naturally and easily. But it doesn't happen the same way for every child. And not understanding the different ways it happens is what leaves parents confused about what to do and how to help. To explain how kids learn to read on their own, let me tell you about Easter when I was growing up. At Easter, my brother and I always got tons of chocolate, and by Easter Monday, mine was gone. But my brother would eat these teeny tiny crumbs and make his chocolate last all the way to Christmas. Learning to read naturally can be like that. Some kids do it bit by bit, others all at once. But either way, two things have to be present for it to be natural and easy. Remember the 12-year-old girl I mentioned? She got a part in a play, but couldn't read the script. That was the weekend she learned to read, because she wanted to. Reading was suddenly relevant to her life. The first part is eagerness. You see, the brain is wired to learn what's important and meaningful. If reading doesn't seem relevant to them, learning feels like a chore. Relevance comes naturally and often unpredictably. The more it's part of their daily life, the more relevant it feels. That's why seeing you read or wanting to be able to do something independently, like play a game or read a script, can spark their interest. As it becomes more relevant, they'll be more eager. The second part of learning to read is readiness. Just like you can't make a baby walk before they're ready, even the most eager child can't read if their brain's not developed enough. The parts of the brain for language and symbol recognition and focus all need to be ready. If you push too soon before their brain's ready, it only knocks their confidence and makes reading unenjoyable. When both eagerness and readiness come together, reading happens, and often really quickly. This kind of eager readiness is called alacrity, and it's the key to unschooling reading. When your child is both eager and developmentally ready, they can learn to read fluently in as little as about 20 to 40 hours, compared to over 1,000 hours in school. As John Holt said, reading is as complex as walking or talking. It happens when the whole child is ready, not when the teacher decides. With alacrity, when kids are both eager and ready, reading just clicks. No pressure, no labels, just curiosity and growth. So now you know how reading can unfold naturally without shame or pressure. Next, let me show you exactly what to do when alacrity shows up. To show you how this works, you first need to understand one other thing about learning. Because if you miss it, you could easily put your kids off reading. Now, whether your child learns to read all at once or bit by bit, there are key moments when your support matters most. But for bit by bit kids, catching those moments is especially critical. Think of learning like waves on a shore. Each crash is intense. Then the sea retreats to gather strength, ready for the next wave. Our brains work the same way. Periods of intense learning followed by quiet consolidation. If you try to help when they're not interested, it'll feel forced and frustrating for both of you. But you can't predict when those waves will come or how long they'll last. Sometimes it's days or weeks of interest. Sometimes it's just a single question. But it's during those waves of interest, when alacrity shows up, that your child is ready for help, because that's when their brain is most open to learning. So you have to be patient. When their curiosity shows up, that's your moment. Over the years, I've grabbed those moments to help my son with letters and sounds and combos like TH and SH and even punctuation, all in those fleeting moments of interest. Now, at 8 years old, he's starting to read sentences. It looks like he's taught himself, but in truth, I've been there every step of the way to strike while the iron's hot. You see, that's the secret to unschooling reading. Wait until they're ready, then move fast. But knowing when to help isn't the whole story, because there's only one way kids truly learn. So watch this next, where I'll show you how unschoolers learn anything so they don't forget.